Hi everybody. Sorry I couldn't be here today. I've got another Board of Education meeting. It is Thursday after all, so that means I'm over at the Board of Education office. I have this Thursday and next Thursday yet, and then I think we're all done, so yay. But anyway, yesterday we were working on the ACT reading passages, and I was talking to you briefly about what to do with timing. So hopefully you got the idea as far as the timing down a little bit more. We didn't talk about what to do at the 10 to 5 minute call. So when the proctor calls out that you have 5 minutes remaining for the ACT, your best bet, if you've got an entire passage yet to go, is to try to answer specific questions first. So jump to that passage, look at the questions that ask about a specific word or a phrase or a paragraph, and try to answer those, questions that you can answer without necessarily having to read the passage. If the passage happens to be either the natural science passage or the social science passage, you can probably get away with reading the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and the paragraph that hits right where the first column moves over to the second column of the reading, because that's where the majority of your questions will go towards. So you can probably read those 3 paragraphs and then try to answer the questions as best you can. Otherwise, guessing and random choice, like we discussed yesterday, as long as you fill in the same letter, you have a 25% chance of getting that random guessing correct. So if you fill in that 25% chance, that could add an additional 25% to your grade. 2 or 3 additional questions could really help out your ACT score. But again, the random choice, like I'm going to fill in A, B, C, D, and then C, B, A, and down the paragraph, down the column in a zigzag, probably won't net you 25%. But whatever you want to use as far as your technique is probably the best way to go about doing it. Today we're going to talk about distractors and the types of distractors that are on the ACT. Now, Mr. Etternick should have given you a packet called Understanding Distractors. If he didn't, Mr. Etternick, pause this video and then hand out the distractors packet to the kids now. If you've got your distractors packet, and I don't know how many of you know anything about distractors from the ACT, if you've done any kind of prep classes with distractors, but this packet is a pretty good one to help you understand how the ACT is trying to trick you up. This is like the only test, or one of the only tests that I know of, where they're specifically attempting to give you a hard time by choosing responses that'll be close to an incorrect answer, but that you'll think is a correct answer. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about the different distractors, and you can follow along in the packet. The first question talks about, or the first page talks about what a distractor is. It's basically the incorrect choices that are trying to distract you from choosing the correct choice. And you can read that a little bit more later on your own if you want to. Flip over to the next page. The first distractor we're going to talk about is direct repetition. This direct repetition distractor right there is where the ACT people choose as an incorrect response something that has an exact quote from the passage in it. So if you take a look at the examples there, for the example of direct repetition, letter A is an example of a direct repetition distractor, or letter I, excuse me. You'll notice it says, as a suit and tie lawyer, Marshall focused on those who had the greatest claim to citizenship. If you take a look over in the passage there to the right, you'll see that the words a suit and tie lawyer is a direct repetition of that. So what the ACT is trying to do is, if you're speeding through the passage or the questions, it's trying to say, okay, well, there's a direct quote directly from the passage. It's got to be right, and trying to get you to choose that one. So be careful about that. Turn the page. The next distractor is called the double decision. So the double decision is the answer choice can be divided into 2 parts. The first part of the answer choice is correct, and the second part is incorrect. So if you take a look at some of the questions and the passage on the double decision page, you can kind of see that the second part of some of those are incorrect. And the first part is correct. Again, it's the way the ACT is trying to get you, if you're speeding through the test, to read only the first part of the answer choices and say, oh yeah, that's correct, woo, and then move on, choose it and go on. All right, next one, page 3, is called the switch. The switch is including a word like none, un, changing a word from like to its opposite, upward to downward, or negative to positive, or even within the question stem saying all of the following are an accurate representation of the author's beliefs except. That's called the switch. And it's, again, trying to test your speeding ability as you're reading the possible answer choices and choosing something that could just trip you up. So watch out for the switch as a distractor. Next distractor is called the unsupported positive. This one is like really kind of interesting. It appeals to your positive nature, I guess. So it'll say things like, if you look at the example of the unsupported positive, letter J is an example of an unsupported positive. It says Marshall's triumphant retirement from the Supreme Court. The words triumphant retirement are supposed to make you feel all warm and fuzzy. So if you've got diction that's really highly connotative, that you want to have someone have a triumphant retirement, that's called the unsupported positive. It's just tempting to choose something that sounds really great. Or something that you might agree with. You just have to make sure that the passage agrees with it. Okay, the fifth distractor is called the extreme distortion. This one you don't see as often anymore, but for example, it will say things like always do this, or never, or entirely, and using a distractor that can really kind of throw you off because it sounds like something that's really good, but it's making a generalization. So that's that one. I'll give you some examples on that page. And then the last one is the placement distractor. This one you've probably heard about, and this is why I said reading the middle paragraph, the paragraph that splits the column. There's usually a question in natural science and social science about that column switch, and also on prose. So because our eyes tend to skip over that paragraph, there's usually a question that focuses on that. So be careful while you're reading to remember that this paragraph that switches from column 1 to column 2 is something that will probably have a question on it. All right, so those are the distractors that you need to know about. If you want to take a look at those distractors a little bit more in depth and try to figure out which ones kind of trip you up, that's a good way to kind of plan also for the ACT, because then you know kind of what to look out for. When you know when people are trying to trick you, you know kind of what to do. So the second thing that I want to talk to you today about was your specific problem areas. Now, if you take a look at this is what I found when I was doing the grading of your problem areas. These are the main ideas that you had problems with, mostly generalizations and conclusions. This was your score. Your average score as a group was a 19.75. Your goal is to score 24 on the reading. The high in this class was a 26 and the low was 11. So if you take a look, these were the questions on the packet that I found common problems. I'll show you kind of what I see when I'm looking at how things are graded. So this is your reading results. I'm going to jump to item analysis. And this is what I look at when I see the tests come in. And so, for example, you can see that question 9 has more people answered it incorrectly than any other question. Question 15 had some similar problems. And you can kind of see where those individual areas were. Where you see this yellow occur, that's where people stopped answering questions because they ran out of time. So only a few of you actually made it through the last passage, which led me to believe that what we really need to work on is timing. More than anything else is getting yourself into that timing correctly. But if we go back to your problem areas right here, Mr. Etternick should have passed you out the ACT reading practice test answer key, which Trevor asked from me yesterday. It's got the question number, the correct answer, and then it's got the description of what kind of question it is. If you go to the third page in the packet that I gave you with your ACT responses, all it says is correct and incorrect. Here it shows you, what your answer was, and then here it shows you what the correct answer was. So look at the ones you got incorrect, and on that final page, put in the correct answers, and then take a look at the ones that you got incorrect, that you didn't get incorrect because you were running out of time, but that you got incorrect because you actually answered them incorrectly, and try to determine why the correct answer is correct. What I've asked Mr. Etternick to do is, once you've looked at those, I want you to let him know which numbers you still have questions about and you'd like me to explain a little bit further tomorrow about why those are the correct answer choices. But tomorrow I want to move forward to do some work on the English portion, because other than timing, that's pretty much all I can help you with as far as reading is concerned. English, I can help you with a little bit more before Tuesday. So the last thing that I want you to do is I want you to try out the humanities passage in the practice package that I gave you yesterday. So the humanities passage, it's the third passage in the practice test I gave you yesterday, the one that we did the timing on. It's called Artist and Public, Passage 3. Mr. Etternick is going to time you for 8 minutes and 30 seconds, so for you to take a look at those questions and answer them. And then go to the back and check your work and see how you did at that. But like I said, the most practice that you can do kind of working on the timing, 8 minutes and 30 seconds, is probably the best way that you can help yourself for the ACT. Okay, tomorrow your prompt response is due for your major paper 4, and also you need to make sure that they are printed and bring them to class with you, because you will not have an opportunity to print them when you're in class. We're going to be working on ACT English and any kind of final reading stuff that we need to do. So I'll see you tomorrow. Now let's do that 8 minutes and 30 seconds reading practice.